We live in a very mysterious world, filled with mystery of strange creatures and anomalies. The subjects we explain on tonight's shows are all filled with mystery and unknown. Come seek the answers as we go and explore these mysterious subjects. I'm your host, Chris Fringe.
I'm your co-host, Sensei, signing in from some dot off the grid. So let's take a trip to the dark side of the human mind, to a place where fact and fiction disappears and cryptid theories grace our ears.
And you're listening to The Venomous Fringe. Prepare yourselves as we dive into the madness of the mystery of our world. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. You're listening into The Venomous Fringe. I'm your host, Chris Fringe, and join me this evening as I'm going to be sitting alongside my co-host Sensei and Ryan Tremblay, and we interview the eyewitness who had submitted the Water Valley Dogman report to me that I had read to you guys on Tuesday evening. Now, this individual had gotten in contact with me a day later after that upload, and he was interested in doing the show only for the sake being of getting the official full story out there. Not saying that what I had delivered was the full story. It was the full story, but it was the shortened down version, and preferably feeling confident to go ahead and do this interview. So it'd be good to sit down and talk with CJ, who was the eyewitness who had submitted the report to me. And of course, I had spoken to him prior on the phone, and I've had some talks with him in the past couple of days, and this individual, I can tell you one thing right now, he has a very genuine response. I think this guy, when you hear him tonight, folks, you're going to hear in retrospect of where he's coming from and the source of how terrifying this incident was to him. And I don't think with anybody in general, a Dogman encounter is a very traumatic experience, and we'll get into that a little bit later tonight. But before we get started with this interview, folks, thank you again, Fringeaholics, for tuning in to tonight's show. We're kind of killing it this week. We've got a few uploads this week in comparison to our normals one's upload. But this is a very special show, and I think it'd be good to sit and discuss this type of content with you guys and hear the perspective of where this individual is coming from, because it's a very incredible encounter and encounters. So if you guys would like to get in contact with me, let's just say you're in the Mississippi area, or in general, whether you're in the U.S. or all over the world, would like to submit your cryptid encounter, whether it's Bigfoot, Dogman, Mothman, paranormal ghosts, demons, and in general, feel free to submit your reports at thevenomousfringe@gmail.com. And also, too, folks, if you guys are on social media and you guys are wanting to get in contact with me personally, if you guys want to follow me on any side of social media platform, folks, feel free to take a look at our Facebook group, The Venomous Fringe, Cryptids Paranormal Official. That group we've had run since the summer of last year, and we'd love to have you guys aboard of it. We would like to have you guys feel free to engage with other enthusiasts and discuss your own opinion on cryptids and paranormal, as well as also, too, folks, if you guys would like to join a Discord app, feel free to. It's another social media. It's more of a chat room, more of an opinion-based type format, but those are our two social links as well. And also, if you guys enjoy the content and you like what you're seeing, feel free to go ahead and leave a donation at the PayPals respected down below. We have my PayPal and you have Sensei's PayPal as well. So, folks, whatever one you're interested in, if you are of interest, feel free to. With that being said, let's get into tonight's show. Joining me right now, my guest. I read his story this past Tuesday evening with the Water Valley Dogman in Mississippi. Joining me right now, alongside with the Gatekeeper and co-host Sensei, none other than CJ. CJ, welcome to the Venomous Fringe. Good evening, and how are you?
I'm doing pretty good. How about yourself?
I'm doing well. I want to thank you again for coming on the show this evening. I know that you had contacted me following that upload to do a show interview, and I'm very glad that you wanted to do so. But one of the first things I wanted to ask you is, you want to come on the show this evening to be bare bones. You want to talk about the full incident, because what I had discussed is more of the smaller variation, and tonight you're here to talk the full uncut version, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Now, when this incident, when we were on the phone talking, one of the biggest things I had caught was how terrifying it was for you. And before we go into all the details, and I think it's important too for everybody who's listening, this story happened in Water Valley, Mississippi. Was there a specific region in Water Valley, or was it just like in the skirts of town? Because Water Valley isn't too far from a couple other notorious hotspots with Dogman activity.
Well, in to be honest, I would like to be able to keep the location discreet because I don't think it would be wise for anybody to try to think that they can go look for one of these things. So I think it would probably be better if the location is disclosed to the family and who all it had involved.
Sure, that's perfectly fine, and I totally understand that. One of the reasons why I asked that is for that particular purpose, because again, with a lot of stories that are being told, it's important to always have good reasoning, and in this case, understandable reasoning to why there are things we cannot necessarily explain and put out there for that respective context. Now, this report had started back in 2008, from what I remember you were telling me, correct?
Yeah.
The first report that you had, or at least the encounter, I'm sorry, you had seen this with your cousins, and what happened? What was the backstory on this? What was how did it all begin?
Well, to start it off, out of the three of us, I was the middle. I was middle-aged. So technically it was Matt, myself, and Ryan. Matt was the older one, and we had stayed home due to the fact that my aunt and uncle had left to go to the casinos to be able to meet up with other family who had invited them to a dinner. I guess it was because of a celebration that they had. And we didn't want to go. So we stayed at home. Ryan, knowing him, he was addicted to his Xbox. So he played video games a lot. And Matt, he was more interested in texting and everything. So he just laid out. He was laid back on the couch, just chilling, Well, I actually got their attention to want to go out into the woods, kind of pass some time. It was still daylight, and we got down into the woods. It was kind of like a split in between the types of woods that there were. You had regular hardwood on one side, and you had nothing but pines on the other. And we went off into the pine side, and off in the pines is where the encounter actually happened. That was where the initial encounter happened. And we didn't think much of it. None of us had a thought, had a care in the world. We didn't think anything would happen out there. We running through the woods and, just playing tag. And, well, the next thing you know, Ryan yells over to me and Matt. He tells me, he said, CJ, I think there's something watching us. And we looked around, see anything. This is still in daylight, fixing to go dark within about an hour or so. And it was a cold night, cold afternoon, going into the nighttime hours. And we're looking around. We don't see anything. Well, the next thing you know, Matt looks at me and he said, "Hey, CJ, you smell that?" I said, "What are you talking about?" He said, "Get a whiff of that." So I started sniffing in the air to see what it was, see what they were getting a whiff of and hearing or thinking. It smells like wet dog and death. Like there is no foul odor that could ever match to what we had smelled. And out of nowhere, Ryan tugs at my arm. He says, "CJ, look straight ahead." I'm looking dead ahead. At 100 yards, we see a shadow figure. We can't really make out what it is at first. Now, at first, it creeped me out to the point to where I bolted. So it left Matt and Ryan down there in the bottom. I was halfway to the house before I heard one of them scream. I turned around to go back to them. I grabbed Ryan and I told Matt to run. And we got up to the house and I asked Ryan, I said, "Ryan, what did you see?" Now this kid, at 12 years old, told me that this thing had actually stepped out of the shadows. And what he could see from barely 100 yards was a figure that stood at least 7 to 8 feet tall. And the hands on this thing, he said, was almost double the size of him and Matt's head. And his arms were actually hanging about a little lower than his knees. I said, "Okay." I said, "What color eyes did you see?" He said they were amber yellow. I said, "Okay." At this point, I'm freaked. I'm totally freaked. I'm thinking this is a joke. Well, I tell him to go, let's go in the house, let's calm down, get us something to drink, get something to eat, and we'll pretend it never happened. Later on that night, Matt went into the kitchen. He wanted something to eat, and he spotted it, standing right there about 30 feet away from the window. This thing had followed us back up to the house. They saw more of it than I did, because when I seen it for the first time, I was in the kitchen. This creature had yellow eyeshine. Its legs were somewhat bent, more so bent than straight. His arms hung down right past his knees. And he looked like he had, I want to say it looked like he had long hair, but I couldn't make it out. So I'm standing in the kitchen with Matt. I'm freaked. Matt's freaked. We're not moving. This thing has its eyes set dead on us. Neither one of us say anything to Ryan, but Ryan happens to walk into the kitchen. And the look on his face said it all. This 12-year-old kid seeing this beast out in the woods just yards from his house. None of us moved. I sat back. I backed up from the window. I took both of my hands, one to Matt, one to Ryan, and I backed him up slowly from the kitchen. We turned the light off. We went into the living room. And that was it. That was the first one. That was the first encounter. We told my aunt and uncle about what we had seen and what had happened. When we went out to actually look around the next day is when we found the footprints.
Wow.
These footprints, pardon my French, were freaking huge. I had never seen footprints this size. Never. I had never seen footprints this size. I thought I was imagining things. At the time, I didn't have a phone. If I did, I would have taken pictures of it. So I didn't have a phone. The only phone that I was able to be reached on was my mother's phone. Because unfortunately, my phone had been smashed. And when we seen the footprints, my uncle looked at us and he was like, "What did you see?" And we described it to him. And he started looking in, he started doing he had that look in his face like the gears just started turning. So he started thinking. And, of course, then I didn't hear anything about it, but rumor had it that a few years before we had our encounter, we had heard from some neighboring folks that live in the same area to beware of the Hoopers. We're like, Hoopers? What the heck's a Hooper? We don't know what that was. That encounter told us exactly what it was. And in some people's terminology, they would say it's a dogman. But you have different states who have different pronunciations for what they've seen. In our case, a Hooper. The second encounter went down. I was nowhere to be found. I was back at home. Of course, I only lived about 30 to 45 miles away. I was about a good 30, 45 minutes away from my cousin's house. And my aunt and uncle had gone to visit some other relatives about an hour up the road, according to Matt. So Matt is sitting at home. He's alone. He's already had to deal with one encounter. He he tries to get it off his mind using video games and his cell phone, watching TV, and all this other stuff that he's interested in doing. And well, he goes back into the kitchen, and I think he had told me it was probably between 7 and 10 when it was actually still getting dark fairly early. He was in the kitchen, and he actually seen this thing standing about less than 30 feet from the window again. He is by himself. This boy is older than me, scared out of his wits, and has no idea what to do. I'm just getting goosebumps thinking about it. But anyway, he goes and he grabs two things. He grabs his phone and he grabs the shotgun. He called me first so that he would let me know of what was going on. Now, as I said, my phone had been smashed, so the only phone that was able to be used to get back in touch with me was my mother's. So my mother had a phone call coming in. She told me to come into the living room and answer the phone. I said, okay. So I answered the phone. It was Matt. Matt is running out of breath. He's scared to death, and he is gibbering his speech, and I cannot understand him. I have to calm him down. I was like, Matt, calm down. You have to take it easy. What is going on? He said, that thing is back, and it's got a weapon. I was like, you lying? Are you for real? He said, I'm telling you the God honest truth. This thing has a weapon, and I don't know what it is. I was like, okay, well, what are you fixing to do? He said, I've got Dad's shotgun. I said, whoa. Hold up now. You can't do that. He said, why? I said, we don't know anything about this thing. If you go off popping shots at it, it's going to immediately see you as a threat. He was like, well, apparently I already look like a threat because he's back. I was like, don't fire that gun. I said, do not fire that gun. I said, you will not live to see another day if you fire that gun. Because you have no idea if that gun can kill it. So he hits second wind. He said, I think you might be right. He calms down. He puts the gun away, turns the kitchen light off. He goes back into his bedroom, and he calls his parents. My aunt and uncle rushed to the house. This thing was already gone by the time they got there. Ryan had told his parents what it was. Again, it was shrugged off as nothing more than a fairy tale. But there was one thing that set that encounter off from the other that had them completely confused and scared. Because before this thing had run off, not only did it shatter one of the windows with a rock, it also ripped Ryan's go-kart to shreds. I cannot stress the amount of fear that them two boys had faced while even I was away. I don't go back to that house. I refused. Every time they invited me down, I'm like, no, I'm good. I can't go back. I don't go back to that area. And it changed a lot of the things that I do. Some of the things more than most. I'm nervous just to go hunting, even with a partner. If I'm nervous just to go hunting with a partner, imagine how them two boys are feeling about the whole situation in general. Because it happened to them on multiple occasions. I only witnessed it once. But I know what they're feeling because of what I felt when I seen it. This thing had my knees wanting to break in fear. If anybody decides that they want to try and look for this thing, your best advisory is to don't. Leave well enough alone. It is not a good idea because if you go looking for this thing, you're going to find something that you didn't want to find. I wish I had never seen my first encounter. I feel sorry for my cousins knowing that they had to endure it not once but multiple times. And here we are. I'm older. I've done gotten a little bit more calmed down. It still makes me nervous to go back to that kind of encounter. Even if it's just one encounter, one's too many. But imagine how my cousin Ryan felt when he had his third encounter. Ryan was, I believe he said he was, we're going to go with 18. Seems about right. Ryan was 18. He had a license to drive, had his car, had a job, just graduated from school. Well, this happened before they moved out from Water Valley. So they lived there a little bit longer than I figured. But Ryan was coming home one night from work. And he decided to take the back way. And he usually would take the back way if he just wants to stay out a little bit longer, you know, kind of get his mind off work before he gets home. Well, he turns down one of the gravel roads that reconnect with the main road that goes straight to the house. And he said that he had seen a tall figure on the side of the road Now, it was off in the woods, so it's not on the road where you can actually see it with bright lights. But it was off on the side of the road. It was a very tall figure. It was broad-shouldered, and its legs were straighter than what we had encountered. Well, he's sitting there, and he's looking at it, and he said that this thing had yellow eyes and looked to be about 8 foot height. And he's telling me about this. And I asked him, I said, before you go any further, so you think it might be another one of them hoopers? He said, without a doubt. He said, my hair is raising up on the back of my neck, and there's no doubt that is another one of them hoopers. I said, well, okay. All right. Could you get a color of his fur or hair or anything? He said, yeah. He said, with the shine of my lights, it was a black fur, black long fur. And it looked like this creature had a mane, like a lion. It had more of a German Shepherd type look, and the ears were pointed. And I'm sitting here, I'm like, that's close to what we seen. They said the one we seen wasn't standing up, it wasn't standing straight up. I was like, you noticed that too? He said, yeah. He said, I was just too scared to admit it. I was like, well, now we've got something to be afraid of. But when I told him about this, I said, do you remember what I told you all those years ago? I said, what do you mean? I said, when a person or creature is acting out towards somebody or something, chances are that person has disrespected or decimated that property. When you go in to a property and you buy a property, you need to respect it, because not only is that your home, but it is possibly the home of something else way bigger. You have to understand. You have to give respect in order to receive it. If you respect these things, chances are you will not have an attack, unless you just come across one that's all around aggressive and does not care. This is not a creature to be trifled with. I understand there's a lot of skeptics. There's a lot of critics. When you have actually seen one of these things, you'll never know what the people that have seen them are going through. You'll never understand, because you don't believe in what you have not seen. Seeing is believing. I would not wish a creature of this magnitude even on my worst enemies. As I sit here and I tell my story, I'm actually shaking because it's gotten me that nervous. Because I'm having to go back in time over a decade to be able to share what we experienced and how it happened and what happened afterwards. Now we run it to the present day. My aunt and uncle, they've been moved out of that house for a few years now. They're in a different location. They're closer to where I live. So we've been content with staying away from that area because after what I had told Matt and Ryan, they now see what I have been trying to say. It seems as if the decimation of a property led to the cause of the encounter and potential attack. So I just want people to understand. I don't want them to be afraid to be going out into the woods, stuff like that. But you need to be aware of your surroundings. Be vigilant. I can't stress enough how dangerous this creature is. And at this point, it sounds like we had multiple creatures. Because it was a different description for the second one than it was the first. The amber eye shine compared to the yellow eye shine. The straight stance structure compared to the limp stance structure. That's just me. Am I scared? Yeah. I'm a grown man and I'm still scared of it. And it's like I said, I don't even hardly go hunting anymore because of it. So, but I felt that I should tell my story best way I know how. And for anybody that would want to try and go look for one of these things, put it to you like this. If you have made peace with the good Lord above, chances are that's going to be your last day because you're going to go visit him the next. I don't want to put it that way. I don't want to sound mean. But if you're going to do your research, or if you have any ambitions about these things, do it from a safe distance where you know you won't put yourself in danger or somebody that you love in danger. So I just want people to understand that, and I wanted them to hear the story that I had to say, because I've had to live with this story in the back of my mind for over 10 years, and it's working on my head for over 12 years, my bad, and it's working on 13. So there you have it. You have my story. I just hope that people people will understand. Do not mess with these creatures. These are creatures that were probably here before any of us. Just a thought. So.
Well, for one thing, I will say is that I want to. First of all, I mean, for you especially to come out here and talk about this, it's a very strong thing because there's not a lot of people who have that type of courage, and it sounds asinine for being in a field where you hear a lot of these interviews, but really, I mean, it's hard for folk to really come forward about this stuff, and hearing it and how you're going about it, the PTSD is still lingers. It hasn't changed, and for what you had witnessed 12 years ago, it's never left your mind. Now, you had mentioned prior to this encounter, or at least what I believe was in between, there was apparently activity or something that was told around that particular area of a creature of that gratitude prior to the encounter?
Yes. And there were encounters beforehand, but we saw them as nothing more than fairy tales. Because we had brushed it off as we had brushed it off like you could have put it in an example. You'd have a little child come up to you and you tug on your parent's arm, whether it be your mom or dad, and you tell them that you have a monster under your bed. Your parents are going to shrug it off and never look under the bed. But what if there had actually been a monster under that bed and that child had been telling the truth? See, that's how we treated that situation. We just shrugged it off. We didn't believe it. One, because we had never seen anything like that, so we didn't think it would ever exist. So it was one of those times where we did not pay nearly as much attention to our surroundings as we do now, and that was on our fault. But at the same time, they didn't tell us exactly where the encounters had been happening either, so we had no idea. So that was it was kind of a freaky, it was kind of one of the freaky moments when you come and you know your folks have been there for a while, but nobody said anything. Kind of like a little small town. You got the hush hush, you know. Nobody says a word. So that's kind of the way we took it. So.
And one other thing, too, is that Water Valley is about 15 minutes away from Taylor, Mississippi, which is a very notorious hotspot for Dogman-like activity. Are you familiar with those cases over in that particular region, or no?
Well, I have only heard of one case, and like I said, I've only heard of one case, and the guy that did the interview, he sounded very knowledgeable of how to react to these creatures. But I didn't really start looking into it until further down the road when I started to watch these videos and I started to listen in on the descriptions and stuff like that and the kind of type of behavior that they give off. And the behavior that we got was way different than what he had got. And so that's the only thing that didn't match with mine. Of course, I wouldn't want to try to match encounters because different things happen to different people. And I really I really hate that this man had actually seen this thing not once but twice. Because even with my one time seeing it, I was just like, it damaged a lot of my thinking and how I go about my daily routine when I'm back at home. And when I'm at work, I try to use what I do for a living to try and work my mind and to try and distract me from the thoughts of what is lurking back at home. So that was, but that was the only encounter that I had ever heard of. And I don't recall ever hearing any other kind of encounters like that. So yeah, that would be the only one that I've ever heard of.
Right.
But yeah, Taylor is actually, seeing as it's right there in between Oxford and Water Valley, because you can actually get to Taylor. You can actually go down Highway 7 from Oxford to Water Valley, and there's a couple of roads that you can take to get to Taylor. So yeah, overall it's about 15-20 minute drive. So
now,
right in there.
As for what you had seen, are you under the impression that what you had seen was something of a supernatural perspective, or would you believe it to be of a flesh and blood?
I do not believe that it would be supernatural. And the reason I say this is because if you look into and this is just me thinking,
Mm-hmm.
if you were to look at it from a paranormal side, like you think ghosts and stuff like that, if this were something supernatural, it would act more as if an apparition to the paranormal. That's my take on it. Now, everybody else has their own opinion. So, if this were the case, there would be no reason as to why the go-kart would have gotten torn up, or a rock size of my head would have been smashed through a window. I believe this is flesh and blood. This is something that has super strength nonetheless. But I do believe overall this is something flesh and blood that has lived here for a long time, and a lot of people are intruding on its territory.
Now, when you say intruding, and this is something that I also under the belief too, when it comes to intrusion on territory, do you believe that you guys, when you were walking into the backyard, that forest region, that you had went around some barrier that had definitely set off a negative reaction, a certain territorial type defense in it that led to such occasion?
Absolutely. I mean, it's always a possibility, because a lot of people do not realize where they're walking. With us being borderline teenagers, if not already teenagers in this case, we would not have any knowledge of that. So we would not have as you would say, respect for another person's house. In this case, the woods being this creature's house. So I do believe that it is a strong possibility that we may have intruded on this creature's property, not knowing where this thing was living. And I think that, with that being said, since there were no physical attacks, aside from the rock being thrown and the go-kart being smashed or ripped to shreds, I think what was being sent off, I believe, and and I go off of the previous video of what you said, of what you had said, and I fully agree with what you had said too. I believe that it was a show of dominance. I believe it was more show of dominance and forceful respect for its presence. And with us establishing that with this creature, I do not think that it had any intention of attacking us. But at the time, you would probably see differently because of the way it looked at Matt, and then when it looked at me and Ryan. The same was showing teeth and snarling, like it was ready to pounce. So, with that being said, I do believe that would be, I think that was probably a show, like a showing of your strength and dominance, and letting us know that y'all aren't alone here. I am your neighbor type deal. So,
Ryan, do you have any questions you'd like to add on to that?
Yeah, actually, a lot of people speak of the mind speak when they encounter a dogman. Did you get anything like that? Any telepathic vibes or anything of that nature?
it's something like that. When it happens sudden like that, it's kind of hard to be able to sense any vibes right offhand. But I'll go back to when we were standing in the kitchen, because this is where I would have been able to sense it the most. When we were standing in the kitchen, when it was looking at us, this thing, we'll call it a thing because we couldn't confirm if it was a dogman or not when they were kids, you know? So, when you're looking at this thing, I was getting vibes of unease. It was not, it felt evil, but at the same time, the creature seemed to just want peace. It's like he didn't want to attack us. He just wanted us to leave him alone and stay off the property.
So more or less, it was just presenting itself to show you it's there and it means business, but it didn't want to interact in any violent way.
Exactly. And the two instances, like where he threw the rock through the window, or when he ripped up the go-kart, that was just to showcase the strength of what he can do to us if we were to do what we had done again, which I don't know what we did. I mean, all we were doing was running around in the woods playing.
So you think it was setting an example?
Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense.
I truly believe it was more of an example. I mean, it's more than enough of an example for me, if that's what you're asking. Because I can't go back there. Dude, I really cannot.
Oh, I understand completely. I do.
I can't even take the trash out at night if I wanted to. I mean, it's got me that unnerved.
But so certainly like then, that's for sure.
And I just, you have a lot of people that'll be like, "Oh, you're just afraid of the dark. You can't stand being in the dark." Well, yeah, not anymore. Of course, you don't know what's in it because you've never seen it. So
exactly.
You wouldn't know how I'm
feeling.
feeling.
Who's encountered one, though, will understand. Anybody who's encountered any sort of cryptid will understand you completely.
And it's like I said, I cannot stress this enough. I would not want somebody to go looking for one of these things. Where
no.
we seen them, where we seen these two creatures, well, let me rewind. Where these two creatures were seen, it's no mistake. It was Dogman. They were in fact Dogmen. From the descriptions, the behaviors, the type of sense, the knowledge, these things are smart. These things are fast. They're also strong. You put them together into one creature, and you try to face that by yourself, you just signed your own death warrant. Because not only are you going to get outmaneuvered, but you're going to get manhandled, and you're going to get ripped to shreds.
That could very well happen.
You never know what type of one of these things that you're going to come across. Luckily for the two that were seen, they were not seen as aggressive.
Right.
Because of their actions. They were not seen as aggressive. Had one standing by the road. It didn't want any part of anything. It was just standing there staring at my cousin as he was coming home. And he happened to see it. No aggression.
I am curious, though. Was there any body language from either sighting? Maybe some head tilting from the Dogman, or ears going back, or anything along those lines?
No. There was no... From what we could see in the first encounter, there was relatively no body language because we were still trying to make it out. We were trying to make out what we were seeing, which puts it into perspective that he was actually somewhat still in the shadows. So even if he had made any kind of body language, it was hard for us to be able to distinguish what kind it would have been. Now the second, my cousin was not 100% sure, so I would not be able to quote on that.
Okay.
Now, one thing that I will also mention is when you described it, right? The what it looked like. Did this thing look more like your average werewolf from like your typical werewolf movie, or did it look like something that kind of was more like a dog-like? Do you get what I'm saying? Did it feel more, had like a canine-like instinct to it versus what your typical werewolf-like would have? The reason why I ask this is because there's often been a bit of a misinterpretation and a downside to the descriptions of some of these creatures. But I only ask also too because you had made mention that, you know, you had one encounter with a possible one of them, and then there was another one with another one, a little different. So I just wanted to get an idea on the descriptions of them.
Okay. This is the best way I can be able to explain it. If you have seen, I believe the movie is called Soldier Dogs.
Dog soldiers.
Dog Soldiers, there it is. I got it mixed up, my bad.
No problem.
Dog Soldiers. If you've watched that movie, the first encounter that we had would have a similarity to one of the werewolves on that movie at the end of it. It would have a little similarity, which means in the first encounter, we are not 100% positive, but we know of what the legs look like. The legs were not straight. In that movie, the legs were not straight. Now, the second encounter, I can tell you from his description, if I were to look at some of the pictures that you have on your videos, I could probably be able to point it out. Just based off of the pictures that the photographic image in my head that he painted for me. So if any of your pictures, if I could see like any row of pictures that you may have, there is a very high chance that I can be able to point out exactly the one that he was looking at.
Yeah, the difficulty, I mean, there's been a lot of people who've often commented that there have been some that look like the dogs from Dog Soldiers, but I think the difficulty too is that like a lot of the photos that we use are specifically stock or PNG photos, animated photos, so we don't really have a nice idea besides what we take from reference from Hollywood and also other fictitious tales. But I asked about descriptions because I know that a lot of these descriptions there and there, they do tend to have a bearing between canine and wolf. Now, this is one particular question that comes from another individual that was in our show, of course, co-host Sensei. He had to leave, but he had a question for you, and this is his following question. Now, CJ, I know that this may have been a bit traumatic experience, but I wanted to ask you to try back and think back when you looked straight ahead and you had seen this figure and shadow and creature for the first time. Your first emotion, the response of your body and mind had. And then, when did you know it was something that you had to get away from?
Well, the first thought that come through my head was, okay, this does not look like a friendly creature. Like the set in stone emotion was literally terrifying. I mean, it scared me. I'm not easy to scare. It scared me. And I think the reason that I would have, the reason that I would have reacted the way I did is because usually I would base it off of instinct. Because if you see that there's something, if you see something that you do not think you can overcome, you try to run and retreat and regroup to think of another strategy to be able to combat this thing. But in this sense, this was run, get to a safe spot, and do not try anything stupid. So that's basically how I look at it. And I don't think I made a wrong choice in the actions that I did. I feel bad. I felt bad that that during when the first encounter had taken place, I had actually ran off and left my little cousin behind. I felt bad about that. I hugged him later and I told him I was sorry. Because in that first split second, you thought instantly, every man for himself, and you were gone. And that's how I was. And thinking back to that decision, it haunted me a lot. You just think that scream that I would have, if I had lost my little cousin because of that, there's no way that I could have lived with myself. And there's nothing that anybody could have done to change that. Because even with me being the middle child of the three of us, I was the one that had the most smarts. I was the brains out of the three of us. And it was a foolish thing on my part to do that. And I'm willing to own up to that. That was, like I said, it was my mistake. It almost costed my cousin's life. Had it gotten any closer than it did, because I don't know if it ran. I don't know what it did. So that's just how I thought about the situation and how I went about doing it. It was stupid, but at the same time, we put our heads together, thought of a solution to it together, and I was just thanking my lucky stars that my cousin had not been a victim of one of these things.
It's totally understandable. You know, it was a very traumatic experience, and of course, your reaction, you know, it's adrenaline. People have it. Unfortunately, you know, it might not be the most of nicest because, you know, that's like when you're caught by the police doing something, and ultimately, your first instinct is to run. And in this case, you saw that, and that was your first instinct. But luckily, no one was harmed, and in the event, it was well bought. Now, unfortunately, in the case that it led up to, the effects of it PTSD-wise still linger, and you had made mention that you have not had a day gone by where you really do not go, well, you're not a day gone by, but you yourself do not do a lot of activities out in the woods, whether it's hunting or camping. Have you yourself, though, even though that, yes, that this is something that is more of a personal manner that you would have to go about, is there a vote of confidence? Is there a sight that, you know, despite what you had seen, that this will turn over you, that the fear of it may be still there and the thoughts might be still there, but you would still have the thought of freedom and space to go back out and engage in the wilderness anytime soon, or will it never change?
Well, and this is how I look at it, and it will only change if you choose to change it.
Correct.
It is something. It is very hard to change, even under your own willpower. And the reason I say this is because once you've had one of these encounters, and you've been dealt damage to your way of thinking, you have to try to find somebody who can try to relate, but at the same time, you have to make sure that this person isn't going to try to break you down or look down on you because they think you've seen something that spooked you so bad you can't even sleep at night. No, you would need to find somebody that you can trust, that you know you can count on, that you can talk to, whether it be your parents, whether it be your siblings, whether it be your extended family, whether it be your friends. It doesn't matter. As long as you trust somebody, that person that you trust will be able to help you regain the confidence that you once lost because of an encounter of this magnitude. And I firmly believe that because I have had a couple of people in my corner that have helped me. And I'm slowly getting back into doing things outdoors. Now, don't get me wrong. I don't go alone. I refuse to go by myself. I will not go. You can try me all day long. I will not go. So, with that being said, it's always good to have that one person that you can trust that can help you regain your confidence to do the things that you once loved to do outside. And I have tried to do that, and I'm steadily working at it, and it's taken me a long time, as you can see. So it's not something that can easily be changed. You have to work your way back into it. So that's just how that's, in my opinion, that's how I look at it.
That's a very good way of looking at it. It's totally understandable. Before we conclude the show this evening, Ryan, do you have any closing questions or any closing thoughts you'd like to deliver for CJ?
Actually, one thing that caught me about his encounter was the straight-legged creature that he described. How certain are you that that was a Dogman and not a type of Sasquatch, perhaps?
Okay. Can you repeat that question?
Okay, yeah, you had said that one of your cousins had seen a straight-legged being with the straight legs, not the canine legs. Now, it could be possible that that was a type of Sasquatch that's known to look like that as well, given the yellow eye shine also.
Well, it's kind of, I firmly believe that it could have been, it could have been either one. I went with Dogman because the way that he told me, I asked him if he could smell anything in the air.
Mm-hmm.
And he was getting a familiar smell like what we had actually smelled in the first encounter. So that's what led me to believe that it was a possible Dogman that he had seen. Because I've looked back at reports and I've heard some encounters from Sasquatch, and Sasquatch has a real musty odor. So, with that being said, it didn't seem like it would match with the same type of odor that we had smelled at that time, which led me to believe that it could have been a Dogman. So I could be wrong, could be right, but that's what I believe it would have been, simply due to the fact of the odor that it was giving off. And he also did say that it had pointed ears too.
Oh, okay, yeah, that totally lines up then. Okay. I was just curious about that.
Yeah, he said it also had pointed ears. So that really threw it into, okay, this has got to be another Dogman. So, but other than that, I have heard nothing. And overall, I want nothing more to do with these things. So.
Very good.
I can understand that, CJ. And with that being said, we're going to conclude the show, folks. Before we do go, I'm going to say a couple of closing words and arguments before we go and proceed. CJ, first and foremost, I want to thank you again for taking the time out of your schedule to come and sit down with us to talk about your encounters and stories. And hopefully these do help folk, whether in the Water Valley area or in general. And one thing about you, CJ, and this is something that I had also commented on when I had read your initial report, the emotions and the thoughts of how you feel towards this have never left you traumatically, and even how you vocalized, the change in life following afterwards, and of course what happened with your cousins and whatnot. And your emotions and how you feel about this has been so, I could feel it. I could feel the vibes, the terrifying reaction that you have. And I have to give you a lot of credit for taking the bravery to sit here and to talk about this, because this is not a very easy subject to talk about, unfortunately. It's a very complicated subject, and one that does leave people thinking and traumatized because of the circumstances. But I wanted to say that you're a very brave individual for coming out and discussing this, because it's not every day that we can get this type of discussion, and hearing it from you from your own perspective, it's even more uplifting to feel because of how hard it was. So you should feel very proud to at least open about it, to take a deep breath and note that it's said, it's never left, however, but it's out there.
Well, I appreciate you having me on, Chris, and I want to say that it's not easy to talk about something like this. And even with me at the age that I am, it still hurts. And I may not show it. I don't know if y'all can be able to tell it, but it's got me unnerved. It's still gonna have me unnerved for a while. But I'm just glad that I could be able to get my story out, to be able to give a better perspective on not only from one side, but both sides. And I just hope that anybody that hears this understands what I say. Do not look for these things. They're hidden, and they're hidden for a reason. Leave them alone. You respect them, they'll respect you. It's give and take.
Absolutely.
But overall, I appreciate you having me on, Chris. And I just wanted to be able to give y'all the story that I feel that not only you, but your viewers can also be able to listen to from my perspective, so they'll understand just how much it hurt for me to even tell the story, because it's hurting me a lot right now. So, but I just wanted to go ahead and fill y'all in on what really happened and what happened from our perspective and how we're all doing today.
I want to thank CJ for coming on the show again and discussing his encounter and his encounters that he had heard from his cousins. And that one encounter, the third one, was actually brand new to me. It was also brand new to Ryan and Sensei as well. We weren't aware of that encounter until we had actually spoken to him for the show actually prior. And he had told us this because following my last phone conversation with him the day of, he got in contact with his cousins, because, as mentioned, his cousins, there's an old phone that has photographs of possible tracks and claws. Now, the problem is that it's the fact that it's an old phone. That's the key word. It's impossible to get currently at the moment, so hopefully CJ can obtain that phone down the road, and I'd be glad to do a follow-up to this case and showcase that evidence. But going back to the case, I mean, CJ had a very traumatic experience. You can hear the emotions in this individual when you're listening to him. I find his response to everything just so genuine, and the fact that this guy had experienced it. And he didn't experience it through like a spiritual way. He experienced it through reality. And as he described, it looked like the dog soldiers. And the way it looked, the way it acted in all of these events. And even though that he will go on, and as he says, he mentioned, he believes that there was more than one, and he believes that it was just trying to show its dominance, as I have mentioned prior when I was doing the analysis of the story. I believe that was the case. I believe that this Dogman had a sense of intimidation coming from these three individuals and decided to challenge them in a way that it would feel challenging of, and did what it needed to do. Did it do it justice? Absolutely. Unfortunately, on the other end, it left all three of these individuals emotionally traumatized. And I do believe PTSD in this field is a big thing. I've interviewed people to where they've broken down on the phone. I can tell by the way they type their stories in terms of when they send me emails, or in general when I talk to them on Messenger, on Facebook and whatnot. You know, I've often, I can hear through their body language. I can just see it through words. that they are emotionally, to this day, even if it was as recent as yesterday, traumatized by what they had seen. They have no explanation. You hear it on podcasts all the time, too. It's the most emotional thing you can get out of it. The most toughest of the things, however, though, is that how do you overcome it? Well, unfortunately, I don't think, and I'm not saying this in a way to kind of disadvantage or throw negative signals at anybody, but I don't think that there is really a way to overcome it. You have to. It's more of if it's a you thing. It's first person. It's a personal thing. You have to overcome it yourself. No one can. You could talk to some people to help you feel better about things, as CJ is now adapting to doing more and more things, even though it's still taking some time following this unfortunate event. But I mean, in terms of you personally to get forward and to know what to do, it's impossible if you are not 100%. You need to be 100% in order to adapt. I think that's the most toughest thing when you're dealing with such scenarios such as research and when you're interviewing and speaking to eyewitnesses who unfortunately have never left the day of that incident. It's emotionally changed them. And I can understand. I've spoken to people, I know people who've had these encounters that unfortunately have left them traumatized and they've never felt the same ever again. It's unfortunate, but I guess that's just how it rolls. Now, in terms of overcoming it, going back into it, when it comes to your own sake being, there comes a point in time where you have to overcome a fear. Even if the fear, to me, is something so small, such as a phobia. I have a fear of bikes or something like that. I mean, it's a poor example, but my point is that there are people who have those fears. To overcome a fear, whether it's to get on a bike, you have to learn yourself, and also to go out into the field of research, or not research, wrong word, but to go out into the woods and, walk around and be around your surroundings. I mean, I don't encourage people to go out into woods. I don't even encourage people to go into parks. I mean, you can go into parks, unarmed, depending on how thick you go into the park. I mean, if you're about a mile in and it adapts into a forest line, that's one thing. But at the same time, I don't think anybody should go anywhere in the woods unarmed. I think everybody should go in with at least some sort of protection, or at least carry something that would prevent you from becoming a possible prey of something. And it's not just cryptids, it's also bears and mountain lions, depending on where you are, and I think for those who out there who have to take that understanding to adapt into those woods again, note that yes, there are things out there that you can't explain, but at the same time that you are a human being with minor goals and of course bigger accomplishment. So it's a thought process, I guess. And I'm not speaking to know it all. I'm just giving my own hypothetical on the term of what I believe would be the right way to move on from this. But I can't change everybody, as of course you cannot change not everything because of that case. I'm not an expert. I don't have a degree in any type of psychology, PhDs or anything. It's just how I've kind of seen body language and seen notes from how people have went through this. But I want to say thank you again to CJ, and even though that his cousins, and if they are watching this show, please understand that I do believe you guys. I think Ryan, Sensei, we all have believed what you guys have went through. We are here for you. And CJ, you're always welcome to get in contact with me. And always, folks, I want to thank you all again for listening into tonight's show. As I had mentioned earlier, if you guys are interested, feel free to get in contact with me email-wise at thevenomousfringe@gmail.com. And if you would like to join some social media groups, we have Facebook group, and then we also have a Discord group. So, folks, check out those links down below, as well as if you are interested in contributing and donating to the show, equipment, and research purposes, there are PayPal links down below. That being said, ladies and gentlemen, my name is Chris Fringe. You all have a fantastic evening, and good night.